So we're going to take another look, a deeper look into this data repository. So let's go down here. To add on to what Eduardo was explaining, I just want to dig a little deeper into this interface that's kind of built into Spring called CRUD repository. So what is that? Well, first of all, our repository, we can call it whatever we want, right? It makes sense to call it book repository because we have a model, a class called book. So we're going to make it a book repository interface that extends the CRUD repository. So if we actually take a look at the documentation real quick for this interface CRUD repository that's built in, it actually has a whole bunch of stuff that's already written into it that we're going to inherit by extending from CRUD repository, right? So we don't have to do any of the work of writing any of these methods at all. Because again, an interface is really just basically a list of instructions. I need you to implement these methods. I don't care how you do it, just make sure you do, right? So the Spring framework and all the JPA that's built in there is going to parse each of these method names, the names themselves actually, and then write some kind of SQL query underneath the hood. So again, let's go look at that CRUD repository. So here we have it. We got the interface CRUD repository. This is, pretty bare bones documentation. There's not a lot of examples of how to use it. So sometimes documentation isn't, the most helpful place to go, but there are other resources, and I'll show you those in just a second. So here as part of this repository, we have T, which is a generic, right? So it is a placeholder for whatever class we want to put there. And in our case, it'll be a book repository. So we're going to have to indicate that it's a book. And on the other side of that is going to be ID. So this could be an integer type, but we're going to use long, which is just a bigger capacity integer, right? So that's what these are. It's just a generic. It says that you can make your CRUD repository with a variety of types. And so we can customize it for our type. Likewise, we can actually customize some of the methods, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But there are actually methods that are built into this already that we're going to inherit. So if we take a look at the documentation, we have delete, where you pass in the actual entity itself. So it's like an instance of book that you would pass in. And you actually don't have to explicitly put that in your repository to make use of it, right? So if I go back to my repository, I don't actually even have to put that there to be able to use it. And that's because it returns void, it takes whatever entity it is, and it can implement it right away without having to ask you anything about it, right? Same with a couple of these, delete by ID. Also find by ID, which is just retrieving one book, right? So you can search by the ID, it'll write the SQL underneath the hood to go get it for you. And you don't even have to put it explicitly in your repository. Same with save. So you're gonna use save, just like was said in the last video. You're gonna use save for both update and create, right? So if the entity is already in the database, it will just update it. And you're passing in a whole instance. And then if it's not in the database, it will create it. So that save method is what you're going to use for both update and create, right? Now, this find all, you'll notice I actually did have to implement it explicitly, actually not implement it. Spring is going to implement it for us, but I do have to declare it here, right? And the reason why is because specified in the documentation is just that it will be an iterable, right? So that's sort of the superclass of list, of array list, of probably a bunch of other collection types, right? So this iterable, you're going to specify what type it is, so you do actually have to explicitly put it in your repository. So that's just a little bit more explanation of why we're going to do these things. Now, creating your own queries. Now that's going to be fun, but for right now, for the assignments that we're doing, a couple assignments forward, even languages, we really won't need any of those extra queries, right? We have built in create, read, update, delete, at least one for each of those. And we also can find all CRUD operations, you actually don't need any more than that. But once you get to the Lookify assignment, that's where you might want to experiment with the other kinds of derived queries that you can do, where it parses the name and figures out what you want, right? So we do have the official documentation that is linked at the bottom of this lesson, right? So we have the Spring JP data docs. And if I go there, not there, here, I can actually see the official documentation for it that in the last video he did go over. But just to get into this a little more, the examples they show here are not going to be what you put, right? So this has last name and first name. We might say description and title, for example. So you are going to have to play around with this a little bit, right? So in our book method, I could find one of these. Let's say I wanted to find all the books with a certain title. What I'm going to do is go into this documentation and see if I can find something that's kind of going to match what I want, right? So in this case, I might say find all or find by. So you might want to, experiment with it. Probably find by title would be fine. Find by title, maybe find by title is. Find by first name is, find by first name equals, find by first name probably like, not like. So there's a whole bunch of example ones here. So find by title is, and then I can probably just pass in string. And this, what it will do is tell Spring to actually just implement that, that method for us, write the SQL for us, and then deliver us a list of books at the end of it. So we do have to tell Spring that we want this query to be added. Actually, let me go put that find all back in there. So yeah, have fun with that. Again, this is really, you're not going to need it until the Lookify assignment, but it's a lot of fun. Also, a good resource here we also have at the bottom of this page. Don't sleep on those links. Don't sleep on that documentation. Go explore it. But specifically for the Lookify assignment, there's some examples here at FileDung, which is a really great resource that will maybe help you with some of those queries that you're going to need for that assignment. So just a tip for the future. And that's that. All right. Have fun, guys.